Tonight, we're here to listen to a woman who rejects political correctness and instead seeks out the facts, just as I was taught as a young reporter. This is a woman whom I admire for speaking her mind, and she is proudly defending our culture. Michelle Malkin is a mother, she's a wife, a blogger, a conservative syndicated columnist, longtime cable TV news commentator, and best-selling author of 7 books. You gotta pick up the latest one, it's great. I'm sure she'll talk about it some more. Open Borders, Inc. Married for 26 years and the mother of 2 teenage children, 16 and 19, right? She lives with her family in Colorado. She started her newspaper journalism career at the Los Angeles Daily News in 1992. Moved to the Seattle Times in 1995. And has been penning nationally syndicated newspaper columns for Creators Syndicate since 1999. She is founder of conservative internet startups like Twitchy.com and Hot Air.
Because I'm full of it.
She's very witty too. Michelle has received numerous awards for investigative journalism and has been the staple on conservative television and radio programs, including Fox News and our beloved Howie Carr. Yeah. We love him.
Is Howie here?
As a mom and former, right. Happy birthday, Howie, if you're listening. As a mom and former journalist myself, I cannot tell you how proud I am to be able to bring this brave, outspoken, conservative woman to Maine. So it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Michelle Malkin.
I'm so scared of you all. Aren't you scared of me?
Oh, terrible.
Aren't you scared of me? I'm real scary, aren't I? Right? This has been an extraordinary journey. And I've done this a long time. I've spent more than 25 plus years in public life, out of the closet as a conservative journalist of color. And boy, does that trigger all the left people.
We're scared of you.
It is flabbergasting to think that it took 4 different venues to find a place for peaceful patriots to gather in love, not in hate. We love our families. We love our country. We love our God. And these are the things that make us public menaces. These are the things that put us on quote-unquote hate maps, sponsored by the likes of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. Hateful. Yeah. Well, we're broadcasting live on multiple of the platforms that are carried by Silicon Valley, which works in cahoots with the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is not a conspiracy theory, Portland Press Herald. This is actual fact. I know that's a strange concept to so much of the fake news. Yes. Oh, more hate. Oh my goodness. See, this is why we're not allowed on college campuses. This is why we're not allowed at Sheraton Hotel or the other country club or these other places. Take note that all it took was essentially a Facebook heckler's veto, led by some anonymous Twitter account that, of course, is allowed to operate and traffic in lies and hates. It came to my attention over the last week, some account that calls itself, oh, they always call themselves the most noble names, don't they? This one was called Support Maine's Future. Right? And the translation for that really is support Maine's left-wing open borders policies that are going to turn Maine into California and Virginia forever. Right?
No.
And so for exposing these anonymous social media thugs and for exposing the very disgusting ways in which our overt enemies cooperate, either directly or indirectly, with our supposed friends, this is what's gotten me into trouble, right? Because it's really easy, and I have been a regular on Fox News for upwards of 20 years, almost since the founding of that channel. And God bless Roger Ailes, because at a time when there was no other alternative other than Rush Limbaugh, many of you in this room are old enough to remember this, before there were social media platforms, before there were blogs, it was Rush, Fox News, and Drudge.
That's right.
These, and this is important because, you know, I try to be a bridge between this incredible generation of young patriots who are discovering these battles with the gatekeepers, that there are older folks who came before you, who've been in your shoes. You know, there's this famous phrase now to sort of denigrate, in many ways properly, the older generation of people who don't get it, right? Who are part of the problem. And the phrase is, okay, boomer. Right? We know it, right? But what I think is incredibly important is that you know is that there is a proud history of gate smashing boomers, of gate smashing Xers, and you know, this incredible Generation Z America First movement is now facing the slings and arrows and smears that many of us who smashed gates in this long battle on the right have been, you know, proud to be at the forefront of. So you were part of a long line of dissidents, and you know, I could have retired. I could have hung my hat up after my 20th anniversary of newspaper syndication, or you know, after a quarter century of the investigative journalism I've done, and after the 7th book. It actually would have made sense after 7 books to say, lucky 7, I think I've said all I've said. And then I saw some of these kids showing up at conservative events. Now, this is let me give some context here, because some of you might not have been paying attention as closely. And it's not being reported on either the mainstream press or the conservative establishment press that this battle is going on. They don't want you to know about it. And in fact, all they want you to know about it is what they control the message about it is. And so these young kids are putting everything on the line. They don't have their degrees yet. They're risking their grades. They're risking their futures to stand up and say, wait a minute. Why is it that there is this toxic alliance that is conspiring against American students, American citizens, American families, while they're operating under the banner of so-called America First? Why don't they see the problems that are going on, not just with the southern border, not just with illegal alien crime, not just with these sanctuary cities, all the euphemisms and the Orwell, they're outlaw cities, right? Yeah. They should be prosecuted. Yes. Why is it that when we had Republicans in power for so many years, that they didn't do what they said they were going to do and defund sanctuary cities? Enemies on the left are, yes, and so it's safe to say that. And so you'll see conservative establishment media, all the DC press, and they'll always blame Democrats, and yes, it's easy and it's fun to make memes about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay, that's easy all right? Let me do a little gamer speak here, okay? So there's easy mode in games, and so many Republicans in the Beltway establishment or any political machine in any of the states are on easy mode when we need to be in constant battle mode because we are at war. I can see some liberal blogger right now accusing me of incitement to violence. Oh my God, she's in a war.
Where do I sign up?
Right here, right now.
How do you get rid of AOC?
Oh, we'll get to that. We've got other problems, right? We got to drain our own swamp. We've got to clean up our own house. And it starts with supporting students like these kids, like Charlie and Jeremiah. And it means sending people like Adrian to Congress, right? And it means making sure that Mayor Nick Isgro becomes the leader of the party in Maine at some point, right? That's what I'd like to see. We need a takeover of the establishment Open Borders Republican Party. That would be the fulfillment of the incredible milestone that we all witnessed when Donald Trump was elected in 2016. Yes. Now, not everyone initially supported him in the primary, but there was no question in my mind that this man represented the desperate change that we needed in the swamp. I've dedicated my life to exposing the dire consequences of open borders for the last 25 years, ever since I started my career at the Los Angeles Daily News. And you see what happened to California.
Yes.
And this is the problem, all right? You can't just blame AOC or Ilhan Omar or the Democrats. California was a bright red state. And the last grassroots gasp for air in California was Proposition 187, an initiative that had the nickname SOS appropriately. It stood for Save Our State. And it won a majority of the vote in California. Can you believe it? Can you believe there was a time when we had a Republican governor, Pete Wilson, and Republican state legislature? What happened? What happened began in 1965 with the Hart-Celler Act, which was sold falsely to the American public as a way to change the demographics of the country, but without really changing the country. Right? Then 1986, and the horrible bargain that unfortunately Ronald Reagan made to give a one-time amnesty to millions and millions of illegal aliens. Oh, and what was the end of the deal? Well, right, what was the other end of the deal? Oh, we'll finally get full enforcement of our immigration laws and secure the border. Okay, it's always like that Peanuts cartoon, I'm showing my age, right? Of Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football, right? And the Republican Beltway has sold this trickery to the base of the party again and again and again. And so the future was already set in stone there between 1965 and 1986. And then between 1986 and 2001, when we were hit by the jihad attacks, 19 hijackers who came in through the front door, several of whom who overstayed their visas, were allowed to operate here untouched and unscathed, several of whom were in direct contact with illegal aliens from Central America who marched with them up to a Virginia DMV to secure under fraudulent means the ID that they used to board the planes that they crashed into the World Trade Centers, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the White House. When I talk about the nexus between illegal immigration and Homeland Security, the eyes roll from the social justice warriors and the never-Trumper Chamber of Commerce types. Why are you still talking about 9/11?
That's when it started.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's because for some of us, it left an indelible impression. It was because of 9/11 that I became an author and wrote my very first book in 2002, Invasion. That's a trigger word. Trigger word, not allowed to say it. Hateful. It is an accurate description of the means through which those 9/11 hijackers came in and through which millions and millions of people whose first act on American soil was to break the law. September 11, 2001 should have been the date that America said, enough. No more. We're full. But we hit the snooze button again and again and again. And it's easy for people who did not have any direct relationship with the firefighters or the police officers who marched up the stairs to their deaths. It's easy for people who didn't live in any of the areas that were directly hit or had relatives or business colleagues who died in these infernos. For many of us who did not have those direct ties, and I did because I was living in the Beltway. By the way, refugee, right? I'm a Beltway refugee. That's a good kind of refugee, right? Although I have to say I felt like a refugee bouncing from place to place to place here, right? It's like we're refugees in our own country. What the hell is happening? So I was fueled by my outrage that this incredibly generous system of welcoming people to America was abused and exploited by evil people. This is why I just have to laugh when so-called reporters will dare to run on their front pages, as the Portland Press Herald did. Thanks, Rachel Ohm, are you here? Description of me as quote-unquote anti-immigrant. How dare you? How dare you? And by the way, yeah, I'll play the color card for a second. It's mostly really, really, really pale white progressive people who point their finger at me and sputter that I'm a racist anti-immigrant bigot. Isn't that interesting? By the way, a very wonderful, trenchant writer on these issues, Steve Saylor, describes that method of ad hominem attacks by these political operatives as point and sputter. That's all they do. So it was fascinating when I had spent 40 minutes talking with this woman late at night on, when was it, Wednesday night, talking to this woman, and she had asked me specifically about being called these things. And I said, yeah, where did you get that from? And of course she quoted the left-wing assassins, character assassins at the Daily Beast. Right? And I had specifically told her in response, as a rejoinder to being called anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, that I am the child of legal immigrants, that I am the wife of the great-grandson of Jewish immigrants who came to this country to escape the pogroms from Ukraine, and that I am the proud mother of two multi-racial, multi-ethnic children. Go ahead and call me those names
Such
again.
a hater.
And they did. And I called them out on their blatant defamation, after which they scrambled to stealthily edit their article about the Maine college Republicans inviting me. And then I had to send another series of emails to them because as a journalist, I am familiar with the ethical standards that they say they abide. One of which is if you correct falsehoods, that you're supposed to acknowledge that you have made a correction. Yes. Fake newsers. Phony, hypocritical, sanctimonious political operatives masquerading as neutral, objective documenters of fact. Trolls too. That's a much more succinct way of putting it. 3 of the 7 books that I've written are on this most fundamental issue. And the second book, which was probably one of the least talked about books, curiously, looked at the impact of expanded foreign guest worker programs on American IT workers. The H-1B program was created in 1990 in the Bush years. Keep note of this, keep track. See, what's so wonderful about being in this room among you patriots, and especially among the young people, is that none of us in this room is afraid to follow the money, find the truth, and tell it wherever it leads. And unless we are able to enlighten the vast majority of people who call themselves Republicans, who voted for Trump, and who believe that they are embracing America First, unless we're able to open their eyes about the complicity of controlled opposition, as Charlie mentioned, and the poseurs who are inside our tent, we are not going to be able to save your state or our country. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce works against America's interests. I've reported in my latest book, Open Borders, Inc., Who's Funding America's Destruction, as well as in a series of columns over the years, about how the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which of course is collecting dues from local chapters who have no idea what's going on in D.C., right? I mean, your local Chamber of Commerce is your neighbors. And, you tend to think that these are good people who are actually caring about the commerce in your communities, right? And your people. And yet the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is clamoring for amnesty for illegal alien dreamers, as well as expanding these pipelines for foreign guest workers, largely from China and India, who are then turning around and outsourcing the knowledge transfer after they're trained by American IT workers who are forced to train them as a condition of getting their severance paychecks. This happened to the Disney workers. This happened to many folks who worked for utilities here in New England and at Southern Cal Edison, many American companies, Uber. And now we have in the Beltway, right at this moment, probably as we speak, people conniving inside the chambers of power in Republican Party circles to stab those workers and students who've been convinced, who've been told from grade school that if they want a job, if they want an income, that they should go into science, technology, engineering, and math. It is the biggest farce. I'm going to veer into a side street here, but you'll see that it's all connected. You know this left-wing theory of intersectionality? Right? Have you heard of this? Well, it applies as well to the forces and the policies that we all have to join together on. How many of you are education reformers? Parents in the room? Any anti-Common Core activists? Yes! 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 The same forces that foisted Common Core and that cooked it up in back rooms in D.C. are the same forces that are behind mass migration. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. And think about what they did. I talk about this in Sold Out, and I illuminate it more in Open Borders Incorporated. Bill Gates bought off the Republican Governors Association. And again, think about this. It wasn't somebody named Obama or Clinton. It was Jeb, illegal aliens are committing acts of love by crossing the border illegally, Bush, right? Jeb Bush, he called himself the education governor, all right? He formed a non-profit, right? A non-profit that helped shill for these so-called Common Core standards. And as any one of you who is a parent who has fought the corruption of basic education in your schools, math education, anybody? That was me. That was our eye-opening. History, reading and literature, right? The substitution of core academic curricula with basically putting the kids on iPads and addicting them to Silicon Valley, right? And so they dumb down the standards. Why do they dumb them down? So that they can point to our kids who are their political pawns and guinea pigs and say, oh, they're not up to the task. We need to import more foreign workers because they can't do math. Because they forced these federal standards across the board, bribed people with stimulus money so that our kids would be dumbed down. Oh, but this is not real. It's just a conspiracy theory. You're just a wild-eyed black helicopter conspiracy theorist. No, this is conspiracy fact. And telling the truth about it is why we have to run around to 4 different venues to find some semi-secret, undisclosed location to share the truth. The upside is, this is why we do jujitsu with Silicon Valley, right? Are you an actual jujitsu person over there? Oh, right, okay. Well, I only do it sort of figuratively. I do hot yoga, though. I need a break sometimes. So I started out as a very early adopter when it came to using the internet. I started my first blog. I always feel like a grandma when I turn to the boys here. I started my first blog, and blog wasn't even a word in 1999. But I had my first website, and I thought, wow, this is cool. I can just, register my domain, and I had my eponymous website, michellemalkin.com. And I taught myself this really old program, Microsoft front page. Okay, and we had these modems that made this old-fashioned sound that went like this. It's like, whoa, I'm speeding down the internet superhighway at 9,600 baud. Yes! Right? And it took all day to upload one page, right? And so my blog, or pre-blog, consisted of a picture of me. It was my newspaper column from the LA Daily News. And because Phyllis Schlafly was my spirit animal and hero, God bless her, I wore my hair like hers so that I would seem more believable because I thought it made me look older. So I had this like Phyllis Schlafly bun. So that was on my page. And then it would basically link to other people who were on the internet, and there was like 5 other people on the internet. Drudge, I can't even remember. Mickey Kaus was a very early adopter. Mickey Kaus, who was a liberal but very good on immigration enforcement issues. And there was such promise on the internet because it was the Wild West. To think, 20 years later, that you could not consider the internet a safe space, just boggles the mind. And it's worth reflecting, especially among the old guard of America First activists in this room, about the promise that the internet held, because there were no gatekeepers. And that's always been the issue in the internecine battles over national sovereignty and immigration enforcement, is that we've always had to face this phalanx of establishment, well-funded gatekeepers. And now, for so many people on the internet, it is sort of like this physical journey that we've had, running around trying to find a place where they're not going to rig the algorithms, where they're not going to kick us off, where we can feel free to say that we support Donald Trump, that an okay sign is just an okay sign, okay? And importantly, when it comes to free speech, that platforms really mean it when you're allowed to say whatever you want, as long as you are not advocating violence. This is the tactic of the Lewinskyite left and the never Trump corporatist, elitist right, is to redefine our values, our love of tradition, country, and sovereignty as hate itself. They've weaponized this tactic to a chilling degree. And I warn about this in Open Borders, Inc. In fact, if you read the introduction, I have a reflection as I was putting the manuscript to bed to get it to the printer, that I was fueled more than ever to get this book out there, because I was going to be next. And I've defended many types of people across the political spectrum because I truly believe in free speech. Back in the mid-2000s, I printed every one of the forbidden Muhammad cartoons. Do y'all remember this? Right? And there were a number of us in the early days of the conservative blogosphere who made it a cause to stand up, because we understood that there were existential principles involved here. Because more than external censorship, self-censorship is just as dangerous. The idea that we would self-edit because some thug in Pakistan might have dominion over our minds and our tongues. And that was a time to stand up and say no more, enough. And not enough people did, certainly not in the so-called mainstream media where they say that they are the guardians and protectors of the First Amendment. I've stood up for my friend Laura Loomer, the most banned social media woman. And the same elitist forces, not just on the left, but in the GOP, mocked her. And then a year later, were stealing her work and plagiarizing her, even shamelessly using her Stop the Bias hashtag as if they had thought it up themselves when they did none of the legwork that she did that got her banned off of Facebook and Twitter and Uber and Airbnb and Teespring. Do we live in Pyongyang? And so when I stood up at CPAC last February, I stood up on a stage at an event that has become a pay-for-play for the swamp. And it's distressing because, again, kids, there was a time when CPAC represented the grassroots of the party. Over time, nationalists were pushed to the margins and to the fringes. And it wasn't until Donald Trump came along that not only was it okay to talk about these issues, but it was the issue. Even today, among many of my detractors, I get the snotty response when I bring up immigration enforcement and all of the horrible consequences, be they on crime and public safety, national security, economics, jobs, the cultural impact. Oh, are you talking about that again? Your single issue. Your singles issue. Isn't there anything else to talk about? No, there's not actually. Because this issue is every issue. And you know it here in Maine. And so this is graduate level, okay? And you've been in battle mode here. And not only do you have to fight all of the Open Borders Inc. funders from George Soros and the Tides Foundation, but it's also the forces on the so-called right. It's also all of these faith-based organizations. And yes, I've gotten in trouble with my Catholic Church for calling out the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Catholic Charities for their role in aiding and abetting a human smuggling racket. Whatever media may be in here or out there listening, monitoring, tracking, or whatever, quote me in full. It is not racist. It is not anti-immigrant. It is not xenophobic for American citizens to stand up for their homeland, period. This is love. I told you it's personal for me. I've traveled around the world. I've been to Kuwait. I've been to Iraq. I've been to the border many times. I've been to Europe. I've been to Asia. And many times I've gone back to my parents' homeland in the Philippines. And I reflect on what my life might have been like if our country, this country, my country, one loyalty, right? Yes. I don't have dual loyalty. I have loyalty to one country, and I make that clear every damn day, right? But there isn't a day that I don't think about this, and there isn't a day where I don't have an attitude of gratitude. Yes. It's how I live my life every day. What a freaking miracle that I can run my mouth off and, well, at least until recently, put food on the table. But certainly have enjoyed a very, very blessed life and career. Out of what? Out of writing words and speaking them. What a miracle. You know, I'm sure I might have been just fine, you know, if my parents hadn't made the sacrifices that they made, if they hadn't had the special skills and the explicit and sworn loyalty to this country.
There you go.
Right?
So
this is the problem. We've given up, we've abandoned the real A word in immigration policy. It's not amnesty, it's assimilation.
that's right.
Assimilation. This is one nation under God.
Yes.
And I find it absolutely vile that for us to say that somehow makes us the bad people. This nation was founded as a Christian nation. A Christian nation. And so then people say, oh, well, if we follow the policies that you're adopting, you would never be here, so.
Yeah, but they did it legally.
It is what it is. And the fact is that when my parents came here in 1970, America was much different than it looks now. And the numbers tell the story. The numbers tell the story. The Center for Immigration Studies just put out a recent study last week that the current foreign population is 46 million. That by 2060, 90% of the population growth in the United States will be because of mass migration, net migration. We have to think of the...
Question real quick, if I don't mean to interrupt, I apologize, just on that point.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, can you wait until I'm done? Just hold it in your mind there, okay? So, we have a current population of 330 million. There are upwards of 30 million illegal aliens currently in the country. I referenced the problem of visa overstayers. 700,000 plus of them running around on the loose. Now, some of them might not be a threat, but all of them are here illegally. And
Right.
New York City, where I just came from, where I spoke at a fabulous event with the New York Young Republican Club, just experienced a brutal death, murder and rape of a 92-year-old legal immigrant at the hands of an illegal alien B1 visa overstayer. Okay. I bet you don't know this woman's name, right? Because the open borders media will not talk about her, just like they didn't talk about Corporal Ronell Singh, the legal immigrant Newman Police Department officer who was slaughtered by an illegal alien gangbanger in Northern California in that sanctuary hellhole last Christmas a year ago.
Yeah.
They don't remember Jamil Shaw. They don't remember Kate Steinle. They don't remember Molly Tibbetts. The woman who was murdered and raped in New York City, her name was Maria Fuertes. Okay? Say her name, right? This is a hashtag on Twitter. Say their name, say their name. No, you say their names, right? American citizens and legal immigrants who are sacrificed at the open borders altar and forgotten and whitewashed. And they say that we're not the compassionate ones, that we don't care about separated families, when they couldn't give a damn about separated American families, separated permanently because of open borders.
Yeah.
We want them to crush us.
They do. They're funding America's destruction. And that's why that is the subtitle of my book. So what do we do about it? First of all, we need to talk about it and disseminate information. And it's especially important that young people get that information, because they certainly aren't getting it from many of these publicly funded universities that are part of the profiteering racket. They are. Every law school in the country is training their students in Know Your Rights seminars. Not our rights, the rights of people who are trespassing our borders. They're the ones that are sending these legal teams down there to give them advice on how to subvert our asylum process, how to evade deportation. And by the way, we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of deportation evaders that have gotten multiple bites at the apple in immigration courts. Oh, but they're living in the shadows. No, they're not. They're out there thumbing their noses at us every single day. Oh, I can see the liberal reporters and all of the fact checkers.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, believe me, I don't. Of course we don't. Right? But you know that the narratives that they set in stone get regurgitated
Yeah.
and get echoed, right? And then here's the problem. They get picked up by the virtue signaling lackeys in the Republican Party. Right? Now, those of you who watched my CPAC speech saw that one specific phrase was the only thing that anybody ever talked about in the mainstream press and among the never-Trumpers. I said that when I was addressing the problems in the Republican Party, that I was talking to you, the ghost of John McCain. Right? And this guy, right? This guy is emblematic. He's a metaphor for every one of the Beltway crap weasels in the Republican Party that make all sorts of promises to put America first, and then every time they get reelected, throw us under the bus and stab us in the back.
That's right.
No more. No more. This is the time. This is the moment. We've got to seize this opportunity that was created by President Trump's election in 2016. We've got a lot of unfinished business.
That's right.
Every day from now until Election Day, we have to hold our own leaders' feet to the fire. Okay? Bread and circuses, impeachment, AOC. I'm not going to bother watching the Democrat debates. There's no debate. Right? And if there's like 8 candidates on stage, you really have to add in the 3 or 4 moderators who act like Democrat candidates anyway themselves. Right? We don't have time to waste on that. We need to be monitoring very closely what's going on in our own backyards. 18 Republican governors standing on the side of Open Borders, Inc. to open up the floodgates to refugee resettlement? Do they not see what's happened to Lewiston? Do they not see what's happened to the Twin Cities? Right? Or Twin Falls, Idaho? If we're constitutional conservatives, we believe in standing up for local control.
That's right.
Local control over who decides who gets in. Follow the money. Find the truth. So many of these refugee resettlement racketeers clothe themselves in faith. They pervert scripture. They try to guilt good Christians into putting their own families last and the rest of the world first. No sovereign nation who adopts those principles is going to survive.
America first.
America first. American citizens first. That is not racist. That is not anti-immigrant. That is not xenophobic. Okay? That's a matter of survival. It starts with each and every one of you. Writing into your own hearts a phrase from the naturalization oath that my parents took: to defend and support the Constitution and laws of the United States, and to defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Exactly right. Exactly right. And the work of Open Borders, Inc. and so much of the work that I've done draws the connections between those foreign enemies and our domestic ones. It is not a conspiracy theory to connect the dots between the United Nations and the European Union and transnational billionaires and Fortune 500 companies and elites and lobbyists in both parties who are trying to subvert our sovereignty and subvert our local control.
Todd Steyer.
Oh yes. The intersection between Open Borders Inc. and Fed Ed and Big Tech has led us to this moment where we see that our borders are under siege, our neighborhoods, our schools are under siege, and our ability to communicate freely. Universities are supposed to be havens of free inquiry.
Yeah.
And I hope that at the end of this, that at the very least, that you will not let those bullies off the hook for trying to demonize these brave patriots. I'm a capitalist, of course. I write books for a living, and there's no shame in trying to persuade people peacefully rather than through coercion or government force to take the ideas that I publish, to consume the words, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them that I've written over the years, and to use them for good. Like I said, it's a blessing and a privilege to be able to make a living at it. I'm now at a stage in my life where I can proudly say, as I have in being a small business owner, that I have no boss. I'm my own boss. That I have no donors. I'm a self-funded operation. And that it gives me the freedom and liberation that so many of the operators in conservatism don't have, never have had, and don't want to have. That's what makes me dangerous. That's what makes each and every one of you a potentially dangerous weapon on behalf of America First. It's cold here, but I hope that we've fired things up with my hot air. Yeah.